7 p.m. Bill, if you want to call the meeting to order, you can whenever you like.
Are we functional? Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah.
Good.
Okay. This is Bill Finch, Chair of the Beverly Historic District Commission. I'm calling to order the slightly regular meeting of the Commission of April 23rd, 2020 at 7 p.m. As I understand this, I need to read a rather lengthy statement as to how this is going to work.
Yep. And Bill, make sure you speak up. Your voice is coming in a little soft.
You keep freezing on the screen and your voice disappearing.
Uh-oh. So Bill, we're having a hard time hearing you.
Okay. Is there anything I can turn up on this machine to make it better?
I think you might need to speak up. You might just need to speak up a bit.
Okay. Anyway, I am going to read a statement as to the functioning of this meeting. Confirming, let's see.
So Bill, your camera, it's cutting out a bit. You might need to. What might be beneficial is if you turn off your microphone and call into the meeting so we can hear you in real time.
They're separate. Oh, I see something here. Mute. Okay, I think I just turned it off.
So we still heard you say that.
You're still hearing me?
We can still hear you.
And see you.
How about now?
You just muted me.
Oh, good, great. This is not the.
Hover over the bottom of the image, and you should get a toolbar with a little red phone in the middle. Your microphone is to the left of the red phone. If you hover over the bottom of your main picture.
Wait a minute, I have to.
Oh, no.
To the left? Turn off microphone, is that what I'm doing?
Yeah, yes.
Yep, you just muted yourself. Okay, so if you want to call in, we will be able to hear you better.
But you also muted Wendy and Miranda.
So anyone who is muted should be able to unmute themselves. We will not be able to unmute you, but you should be able to unmute yourself.
Emily, I figured out Control D also is the mute function.
Oh, marvelous.
So there's a shortcut. I figured that out.
Thank you.
That is very good to know.
Have we other?
Is that Bill?
I think so. It must be Bill.
Oh my God.
So Bill, you may need to unmute yourself. If you're on your phone, you use *6 to unmute, to mute and unmute.
Okay. That's not me. Can you hear me? This is ridiculous.
Bill, there's a very bad echo.
I see that. Hello. Can you hear me? Ridiculous.
Control D.
I put this on.
*6.
I put this on speaker in the theory that it would work better, but I guess it's not.
No, take it off speaker.
Take it off speaker.
How do I get it off? How do I get the screen to get it off speaker? Right now, it's just showing the numbers.
Well, this is good. You sound
Your
good.
voice.
Oh my God.
I'm going to try again.
So,
Okay.
Emily,
Yep.
it's Wendy. There are three of us still on the line, and have we called the meeting to order?
So Bill has called the meeting to order technically.
So I wondered if we could possibly discuss having Susie just do the preliminaries just to get this meeting going while Bill figures out his technology.
I could
Okay.
read the speech.
Bill, can you hear me?
Emily, why don't you have Bill call in and forget the
video.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's see. Hold on. I'm going to give Bill a call real quick.
I could read the remote script, but I'm still going to need Bill to say that he's here when I call his name.
Bill, can
Right.
you
Susie, why don't you read Bill's script? Isn't that a long statement?
Well, I have to get permission.
Oh, all right.
Or can I read the introduction, Emily? And then we'll do attendance at the end?
Yeah, go ahead and read the introduction.
Okay. I'm going to get rambling here. All right. I'm going to read the introduction to remote meeting.
Yep.
Good evening. That one?
Yep.
Okay, here I go. Hold tight, everybody. This open meeting of the Historic District Commission is being conducted remotely, consistent with Governor Baker's executive order of March 12th, 2020, due to the current state of emergency in the Commonwealth due to the outbreak of COVID-19. In order to mitigate the transmission of the virus, we have been advised and directed by the Commonwealth to suspend public gatherings, and as such, the governor's order suspended the requirement of open meeting law to have all meetings in a publicly accessible physical location. Further, all members of public bodies are allowed and encouraged to participate remotely. The order allows public bodies to meet entirely remotely so long as adequate alternative public access is afforded so that the public can follow along with the deliberations of the meeting. Ensuring public access does not ensure public participation unless such participation is required by law. This meeting may feature public comment. For this meeting, the Historic District Commission is convening by telephone and video conference via Google Hangouts as posted on the city's website, identifying how the public may join. Please note that this meeting is being recorded and televised live and that some attendees are participating by video conference. Accordingly, please be aware that other participants or viewers may be able to see and hear you, and anything that your broadcast may be captured by the recording. You have the option to turn off your video if you are participating via computer. All participants should keep their microphones or phones muted unless recognized by the chair to reduce background noise and feedback. Please wait until the person speaking is finished before speaking so we can clearly hear all the participants. Supporting materials that have been provided to members of this body are available from the Planning Department. Please contact Emily Hutchings to request supporting materials. The public is encouraged to follow along using the posted agenda unless the chair notes otherwise. Shall I do the rules too? Okay, I'll
Yes,
read
please.
the rules. We are now turning to the first, oh no, wait, we're not turning to the first item.
So prior to the first item, the agenda
Prior
on
to
the
the first
agenda.
item, the ground rules will be for effective and clear conduct of our business and to ensure accurate meeting minutes. The chair will introduce each item on the agenda. After speakers conclude their remarks, the chair will invite commission members to provide any comment, questions, or motions. Please remember to mute your phone or computer when you are not speaking. You may mute yourself or be muted by the meeting host by clicking the microphone mute unmute icon, pressing the mute button on your telephone, or by pressing *6 on your telephone keypad. Please reserve the chat function for technical difficulties and not for public comment. Please remember to speak clearly and in a way that helps generate accurate minutes. For any response, please state your name and affiliation before speaking. Regarding public comment, after members have spoken, the chair will afford public comment as follows. The chair will first ask members of the public who wish to speak to identify their names and addresses only. Once the chair has a list of all the public commentators, he will call on each name and afford 3 minutes for any comments. For those individuals present in person, please take care to speak loudly and clearly so the microphone associated with the webcam or telephone can effectively broadcast your comments to those participating remotely.
All right. So, Bill, if you want to unmute your phone and call roll, if you can unmute your phone only. By pressing *6, Bill. All right. Well, while Bill's figuring it out, Susie, there is a quorum. You are able to vice chair.
All right.
Do you want to read the confirming member access portion at the?
Surely.
Oh.
As a preliminary matter, this is Susie Lamont, Vice Chair of the Historic District Commission. Before beginning the meeting, I would like to announce that this meeting is being recorded by the City of Beverly and live streamed by BevCam on both Channel 99 and via BevCam's YouTube channel. I am confirming that all members and persons anticipated on the agenda are present and can hear me. Members, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Caroline Mason.
Here.
Wendy Pearl.
Here.
Bill Finch. Okay, staff. Emily Hutchings.
Here.
Jody Byrne.
Here.
Thank you. Anticipated speakers, Miranda Gooding. Are you there, Miranda?
All right, I'm here, yes.
Thank you. Chris Copeland.
Here.
Thad Samasco.
Thad will not be here tonight. Krista Broyles is here.
Okay. Krista Broyles.
Here.
And Peter Benton.
Here.
Okay, very good. We're all here except Bill and Thad.
All right. So, Susie, if you want to go ahead and move on to item 1 on the agenda, that's fine.
Alrighty. Hold on a minute. All right. So the first item of the agenda is the application from Beverly Crossing, the HDC review of Depot Square Phase 2 development, which is a condition of the Planning Board approval of special permit number 172-19, site plan review application number 140-19, an inclusionary housing application number 17-19 for 134, 142, 146 Rantoul Street and 1 to 9 Park Street. Anything else I needed to read? There.
Right. So is there going to be an introduction?
Yes, are you ready? I'm all set.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. Good evening, everybody. Miranda Gooding on behalf of Depot Square Phase 2 LLC, the applicant with Glovsky and Glovsky. And also here this evening, we have Chris Copeland, the principal of the applicant, and Kristen Poulin, I believe I saw join us, both on behalf of the applicant. And this evening, Krista Broyles, who is an architect with SV Design, has been a member of the team, is going to be appearing as well. And as you know, this is a sort of a follow-up edition of project's approval by the planning board earlier this year in January for a special permit to allow a mixed-use development. And as a condition of various boards' approval of the project, including the design review board and the planning board, we agreed to a condition to consult with the commission regarding an historic treatment of the building known as Casa de Luca, which is going to be renovated as part of the project. And so we are here this evening to fulfill that part of the condition and to sort of get input at this stage. We have a design, a conceptual design that's been approved. The team has not yet developed full construction detailed drawings, and this is an opportunity for some input into that process, keeping in mind that the conceptual project itself has been approved, and that I think the applicant has been very clear and consistent in making it known that the intent is not to preserve the building historically, but to renovate the building with sensitivity to the history that it represents. So with that spirit, we brought sort of the approved plans, and I think would be very interested in hearing how the commission would like to think about sort of a treatment plan within those parameters.
Okay. Do you have more to add?
We don't. We thought what might make sense is for, I know that Emily has the materials up. We've submitted the plans. We can sort of suggest which sheets might be the most useful to go to in terms of the elevations, and then we are here to hear the thoughts as part of the consultation process, and the team will obviously take things under consideration.
Okay, very good. I think I see Bill has joined us. Is that correct, Bill?
So Susie, it looks like Bill is present in, he's here, but he is muted. Bill, *6 is the mute button or unmute button on your phone, *6.
Without the phone?
There.
Oh,
There he is.
Yay.
Bill,
Okay.
whatever you're doing, stop. Continue what you're doing.
Whatever I'm doing.
Sorry, don't press any buttons.
Yeah. You sound a little like you're in a submarine, but you're here. Okay, are you there, Bill? Are you listening? Are you on mute again?
Been able to speak.
Yes.
So because the sound is intermittent, it may be beneficial, Susie, if you continue to chair the meeting.
Okay. Do you have, because I hadn't thought about this from a chair point of view, but do you have a suggested framework in mind, Emily, for how you want to walk through this?
So I have the plans on my computer, and what I can do is I can present them through Google Hangouts. So I'm going to do that right now.
Okay.
And so you should be able to see
Here we go.
the presentation here.
Very good.
So if Miranda or Krista wants to guide me through this, I also have some photos that I can pull up as well.
Can I suggest that there are a lot of drawings that are not relevant to what we're talking about. What we really need to go to is the elevations, and particularly the detailed elevations of Casa de Lucas, since that is our subject.
Sure.
And that's fairly far down in that path.
Well,
I believe it. Yeah. That's probably the best.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right there.
To me, that would be a good starting place.
It's 16.
Yeah, so it's A100.13. Caroline is what is being reviewed on the screen right now.
Okay.
Page 14 out of 20.
So are we just having open discussion now? Or is it?
Unless, I know you just invited Krista to make some remarks. Unless Krista has some remarks that she wants to make on this page, I would say Wendy could do that as well.
I can explain really quickly what this drawing is showing as a reminder to everyone.
That would be great. Thank you.
Sure. So this is kind of a flattened out exterior elevation that's looking at the corner of Rantoul Street and Railroad Ave. What we're showing here and what our intent is on this design is that essentially everything from the belt course up on the building, so the second floor, the third floor, the cornice, and the balustrade above that is all in keeping with actually the photos that Emily had sent around earlier today of the 1907, 1910, somewhere around there, historic images of the building. So the window sizes are the same. The use of shutters on the windows is the same as what is being shown in the photos. The cornice is existing, and the intent in that is to keep the profile, keep the design. If anything is rotted, we would repair that in place to match existing. And then we would put back a balustrade on top of that with sizes and profiles that follow the original design of the balustrade, but are composite in material and are not an exact in this visual, not an exact representation of what was in there, but what is pretty darn close. So the height of it is what we believe was existing. We would match the spacing of the newel posts. We would keep the top and bottom rail of that with balusters in between. So everything from that belt course, including the belt course up, is what we're trying to maintain visually as what we see in those 1910 photos. And then from the belt course down is what's what is different. And so what we've taken is we've removed the punched openings that were or are in place and enlarged them to open up that ground floor a little bit to connect it to what its new use will be. So the windows are about 1.5 feet or so taller than the windows that are there now. But they do actually keep just about the same sill height of what the existing windows are. And they've been widened from about 2'8" or so to what we're showing here as at about 4 feet. So there's a lot more visual connection into this space, which is also what is in keeping with what we've done at the rest of the new building adjacent to this. So part of this design is trying to tie parts of this building into what we're doing adjacent to it, so it does feel as though it's connected. And we've included some paneling design below those windows, which is somewhat in keeping in concept of what is there now, but it's a little bit of a fresh take on it. It's a little, more in keeping with, again, what we're doing adjacent to the building. Adjacent to this in the new portion of the building. But the doors remain where they are. We haven't moved those. We've turned in the door that's at the corner. That's a single door now back to a double door, similar to what it is in the original photos, and kept a transom above it. And so I think that's a good kind of quick understanding of what it is that you're looking at in front of you.
Okay, I see where you're going. Yes, Bill?
Can I try and jump in here?
Yes.
My comments are really following sort of what you're saying, starting with the balustrade up. As you probably saw in the photos we sent around, we tried to make it.
Oh no.
Oh, no.
What happened?
Whoops, it's not working again.
Oh, yeah, you just cut out there.
We okay now? Is it working?
Yes.
I can hear you right now, yeah.
Okay. I managed with the help of the Historic Society to get a little better resolution in the photograph that you already have.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you can see from that more clearly.
Oh my goodness.
So I'm going to share the photograph that Bill provided.
Yeah, okay. Is it going to come up?
Hold on one second.
Oh, I think I know where you're going with this, Bill, and you're saying that the profile of the baluster isn't the same?
Well, your drawing doesn't tell us much about the profile of the balusters. We have your intention, and there is an indication on the drawing of a specific product, but I don't know what that product is because there's no cut sheet. But I'm saying if you look closely at the photograph, you can see the balusters are turned rather than plain rectangular balusters. They're pretty simple sort of baluster that if you were doing it in wood, you could probably pick up easily at the lumber yard, but you probably put them in a synthetic material as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I will say that the visual image of the hand drawing that was submitted does show them as a more straight rectangular shape, but the cut sheet, which I did double check today just to make sure, is a profile that is more closely related to what you're seeing in the photo, where it curves out, it enlarges in the middle and the profile is much closer to the existing photo than to what the hand drawing sketch is.
I understand that, but without seeing it.
Yeah.
but the balusters are pretty simple. They're a very standard turn face form baluster.
Just
if you go
quickly,
to,
I'm Googling because the notes, the design notes say the 5-pond Ashley baluster, and when I Google that, I get a turned looking baluster.
no, I didn't Google it. So.
Well, I just did it right now.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm not going to try and interrupt this.
No, I'm crazy like a fox.
Yeah. Okay. Anyway.
If I knew how to share it with you, I would, but it's not a straight.
Yeah. Emily, if you the other graph that's the detail, you can maybe see it a little better.
I don't know how to share this.
After that one?
There we go.
Yeah. You can see from that what they are.
Yeah.
And it's pretty generic, and I think you can find it that's pretty reasonably close. And then the other detail that shows up there is that the posts actually have some paneling on them. Not essential, but it would be nice detail again. Then going below that to the cornice, you can see that there are big medallions and dentals, which I think either are still there or we're going to keep. That, you're going to keep those, the medallion blocks and the dentals in the cornice.
Yeah, this is Krista here. Bill, you're cutting out a little bit for me, but yes, the intent is that the existing cornice, as it remains now, is all going to be maintained. We're going to keep that all. We're going to repair it as needed.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's all original or not, but it doesn't matter. It's there, and it's pretty.
Yeah.
When we come down to the shutters, your drawing shows a solid paneled shutter, and you can see that these shutters are pretty typical louvered shutter, which again, I suspect, there are synthetic products that are basically do that job. But it would be nice to follow that rather than using the solid panels.
Sure, we can look into that. Yep.
Yep. And then the window frames themselves have a band molding on them. And again, I would hope, the window frames that are on the building now are dreadful. They don't project clapboards at all. So I would hope that what you put there, is a frame that has a band mold and projects fairly clearly forward of the clapboard. That's pretty minor.
Yep, and that's exactly what we've specified on the window, a banded molding, just as you see in this image here with the historical.
Yeah. I notice on your drawings you're showing 2/1 configuration of the sash, and the photograph shows 1/1. There is 2/1 that shows up in a photograph of the back. It doesn't bother me which you choose to use. It frankly may look a little better with the 2/1. But three-dimensional piece on the surface, the exterior surface of the glass, to give it some three-dimensionality. You understand what I just?
Yeah, I think what you're saying is the simulated divided light concept, where we see the profile protrude out from the glazing. Right. Yes.
That to me is important if you're going to do the 2/1 configuration.
Right. So we were proposing 2/1. we did feel like it worked really well, again, with the adjacent new construction building. And we are suggesting and specifying the simulated divided light as you just explained.
Okay, yeah. I mean, it's perfectly appropriate to the period of the building. So
Great.
it doesn't happen to be in the photograph. So
Right, great, thanks.
I think that's fine. Can we flip back to the other photograph, Emily?
Yep, hold on one second. Here we go. This one?
Yeah. Now, what, in terms of the clapboards, what is important, I know
Bill, you cut out again. Can you repeat that?
Yeah. I know you're using hardy board for the clapboard, which is okay, but it's important that the exposure of the clapboards be similar to the clapboard exposure rather than a 5-inch exposure, which is what typically happens with hardy board. Did you hear me? Okay.
Yeah, you're still cutting out a little bit, but I heard you say that that the use of hardy is okay. It's just very important that we're matching the existing exposure to the greatest extent possible, right?
Yeah, I mean, which I assume is a 3.5-inch or something like that.
Okay.
It's certainly not 5-inch. You know,
No.
you use 5 inches across the street on the 131. Oh, that's what I like, and that would be inappropriate on this building.
Okay.
I don't know if there are problems with the hardy board building up to become too thick when you space them that way.
That's a good question. I know that a 4-inch exposure is pretty standard at one to get. I will have to investigate something more like 3.5. I will certainly look into that for you. I understand what you're saying.
Yeah, I mean, you also perhaps could simply measure the distance between the first, the and third floor head and sill on the existing windows and see how that spaces out to the number of
right. Sure, definitely. Okay.
You know, in that order of magnitude, it shouldn't be more than 4, and being more like 3.5 would be more typical, or 3, but 3's gonna get you in trouble.
Okay.
Have a 3-dimensional projection of the corner beyond the face of the clapboard, beyond the outer edge. Then the last thing, well, the second to the last thing, the cornice at the belt course between first and second floors clearly is projecting. And you know, I think from your drawing it shows an intention to do that. But I would suggest you look closely at this.
Oh, Bill, you cut out again. Can you repeat yourself real quick?
Yeah, what the cornice, what's on the building currently is just a modern flat piece. I think from your drawing, your intention is to have it have a projecting sort of cornice like it shows up in the photograph.
Yes, that is the intent. And I will say the clearer image that was sent today was really helpful to see, because I didn't realize that it projected quite as much as it did based on this photo. So we will certainly, yes, our intent is to match the fact that it's projecting and more or less the proportions of it. And I think this is a good resource for us to do that.
I can probably blow up a section of that, fiddling with it on the computer to make it even clearer, although it's not going to be super clear, but I can make it a little better.
Yeah, that would be great.
It's actually a glass plate negative, and we didn't photograph the glass plate. We just photographed a contact print that had been made. But if I fiddled with the glass plate, I could probably get a lot.
Well, this one is a huge improvement.
Yeah.
Well done. Thank you.
And he
really
thought, oh, the one, but the print's really pretty dark.
It is, yeah.
So we might be able to get more detail fiddling with it. But anyway, oh, there is a dental course that happens under the projecting cornice, similar not to the big medallions, but the little dentals up above. Not a big deal whether you do it or not, but just would be another nicety. I think the thing that's really important is getting the projection and a bed mold under it.
Sure. We will look at those proportions better.
Is perhaps if you look closely at the detailing on the left, to the left of the entry, both in the way they form the panels under the window. Again, I can put it up better for you because I could see it on my screen, but you can't hear. The panels are actually formed with V-groove or beadboard rather than flat rock.
Huh, okay.
Yeah, which is you sometimes see that in Victorian stuff.
Mhm.
Something to consider, not mandatory, but something that just gives the building a little more feeling. And likewise, they've paneled the pilasters between the windows, and that might be another way to get a little more detail into the first floor without changing the proportions of all the windows. I don't have a problem. I personally don't have a problem with what you're doing with that. I understand why you're doing it. I'm just saying you could probably, dare I say, tart it up.
Yeah.
I'm not sure that's politically correct.
More lively. But did that come through?
Yes, sadly.
Exactly. Yeah, it's okay. Anyway, that's just something to look at. But that's it. That's what I've got to say about it. No, I guess one other observation. I did notice that the nice cornice and balustrade, the cornice sort of dies when you turn the corner. They get cheaped out on the back sides of the building.
Mm-hmm.
You might want to run the cornice around the side that's over your courtyard, at least until it melts into another building.
Yes, that is 100% our intent, to continue that cornice so that it's visible from within the courtyard.
As opposed to having the backside look like the back end of the building.
Right. Yeah, great idea. That's what we're going to do.
It would fit your program better. But that's it as far as I'm concerned. Other folks have any comments? All silence?
How about
It's
Wendy?
Caroline.
Oh, Caroline.
Well, just briefly, no, I think I appreciate very much the improvements that you've made, and I really want to know whether Miranda is wearing her elegant black, since I can't see her. But anyway, thank you. That's it.
That's it.
All right, hi, it's Wendy. I can add a couple of things. I think Bill covered a lot, and the photograph was really helpful. I really appreciate a lot of the restoration work that really is part of this design, like the balustrade and retaining the cornice, and keeping that corner entry as the entry, I think was a really smart choice. And the effort to kind of introduce some kind of paneling treatment was a good idea. I think bringing it up into some kind of vertical element, at least on the Rantoul Street side, is really important, because the historic photo clearly shows that the commercial storefront as it faced Rantoul Street was different than Railroad Ave. Mm-hmm. So I think if you can focus the detailing on Rantoul Street and around that corner entrance, it will bring back a little more of that kind of distinction to the commercial front of the building. So that's just what I wanted to add there. And then I think the rendering may also be a little, it may fool my eye a little bit, but the belt course is clearly a darker color in contrast to the main body of the building in these historic photos. And it reads a little bit like it kind of blends into the color of the body of the building in the new paint scheme. And I would just ask if we could pick it out a little more. It might also distinguish the first floor commercial use from the other use above. as it was historically.
Sure. Yeah, the hand rendering is a little muted. The concept that we had on the colors was essentially like a tone on tone with the trim, all the trim work being slightly darker than the clapboard body of the building. Right now it's showing more or less like a willow green type color, which is kind of a grayish looking green, a kind of a sophisticated green, I would call it. And so what the rendering doesn't show is that the trim and paneling would be darker than the rest of the building. I agree. It's not that doesn't read as well on the computer based on this rendering. So we will certainly look into making that first floor read a little bit stronger in the color, Wendy.
Okay, thanks. And then
I was
Bill?
just going on the color. I'm not concerned with what colors you choose, but I think in the spirit of the Victorian building and the way they use color, the trim should be darker and stand out more clearly than in the.
Yeah, we lost you again, Bill, but that's one of my comments is that in the spirit of Victorian, I thought the contrast of those bands should be a little harder.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, I agree. It's not reading quite as much of a difference as we're thinking. There's still the colors we're proposing are still in the same family of color, with like I said, the trim being the darker accent than the body of the building.
The trim should be a stronger green, deeper green. If you're talking about green.
Yeah.
It doesn't necessarily have to be, Essex green, if you know what that is.
Right. Yeah.
But it needs to be have more contrast.
More contrast. Okay.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
All right. So we'll look through our colors again. I think, we've also talked about probably doing a mock-up on the building at some point as well, so that we can all see it, before the final goes up. So
using a even darker color on the windows is another way to do some of that. Just the sash.
Sure.
It sort of looks like that in the rendering, frankly.
Yeah, the windows are black right now.
That's okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that.
Okay.
I think that's good. I have one last comment and then I'll let Susie talk, but I go back and forth between the shutters because some of the historic photos didn't show shutters. I think I like the shutters, but these are like a raised panel shutter, which it seems we're not on the building. So I don't know if a louvered shutter would be an option, but since they weren't always there historically, I'm kind of a little bit agnostic on it.
On which?
Just point out that difference.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm losing you. What did you say?
The shutters as shown in the drawings are a raised panel shutter, but the historic photo shows a louvered shutter.
Yes.
But since shutters weren't always on the building, I'm kind of agnostic about it, whether shutters need to be on there or whether they need to be exactly those kinds of shutters. And I think I like the shutters. I think it gives it a fresher look. So I just point out the difference.
I think the shutters were there during the historical period. I don't know when they left. Obviously, sometime, in the 20th century. Susie came up with a drawing out of an advertisement. Here she's reaching for it.
You know this one, this old chestnut.
I can't see Susie.
Oh,
Hold on.
if I talk
How
more.
how about now?
Yeah. Where's Susie?
Can you see me? I'll just ramble on till you see
Uh-huh.
my face.
Yes.
It's
Yes.
it's an artist's rendering. It doesn't.
Yeah.
It's what somebody drew, and they probably just didn't feel like drawing the damn shutters.
Yeah.
Or they might not have been there, Bill.
They
No,
may
I-
have done
1897.
enough.
Period. We're talking about.
Shutters weren't invented then. My personal feeling on the shutters is sort of what
No.
Wendy said, is I kind of envisioned it without shutters, but now that I see it, the rendering with it, I think it sets that older building apart from the newer building. It gives it a more distinctive look from the rest of the newer part of the building, so I like it for that reason.
Yeah. I think the one other comment I've got on the shutters, and I assume you already realize this, Chris, is that they need to be installed as if they were operable, not screwed to the clapboards next to the building, but mounted on the frame and so on.
With
Uh-huh.
pintles?
With pintles, yes.
We
We agree. Sure, yes. Agreed and noted.
Yeah.
The only other comment I had was that I wanted to see the balusters on the top be turned, but I solved that issue by Googling this earlier, that you already had that planned.
Okay.
Because the image, it does, in this rendering, they just look like straight pieces, but when I pull up what Ashley balustrade is, that's more in line of what I'm thinking.
Yes. Great. Next time we will send those cut sheets with this so it's more clear.
My one comment on that is I would have appreciated the cut sheets as part of the presentation.
Yep.
Which would have saved a lot of
Understood. Understood. Sorry about that. We'll do that next time for you.
Can I ask a question unrelated to kind of the review we're talking about? There's a drawing of the courtyard elevation that shows kind of a frame and some squiggles on the building, on the firewall addition to the building. And it almost looks like it's a little cased box with some information or history maybe in it. Is that what's envisioned for that spot?
Yes. So that would be what we're envisioning as the commemorative exhibit. And I think Chris might be able to speak to this in terms of who he's talked to get that ball rolling. Chris, do you want to?
Yeah. Chris Copeland with the applicant. Yeah, that's the idea. That's one idea right there, to put commemorative, maybe even artifacts, photos, tell a story there that is accessible to folks. There are benches near there, so I think that's one spot. We have many that have public art that'll have commemorative, I think, photos. But telling the story of the block, I think, is important to us, and we're working with. We've had conversations with Sue Goganian, and we're going to revamp those conversations when we're ready to designate real dimensions and sizes to those spaces, and this is one of them. So that's right.
Great.
Yeah.
Chris, if you're thinking of the historic photos of that and the traffic.
Yeah.
Bill, you cut out for a moment. Can you repeat yourself?
Yeah, the photos, if you're thinking of using the historic photos of the two buildings, that and Trafton or whatever.
Yeah.
They are, the Trafton photograph is also a glass plate negative.
Great.
So one should be able to get a much better rendition of that.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Good.
That would be great.
I want a picture of this video chat somewhere too on the building. Transcript.
It's live streaming on YouTube right now.
All right. I don't have anything else to say.
Okay.
Oh, I'm good. Caroline, are you satisfied?
Fine. I'm fine. Thanks.
Bill, are you satisfied?
Oh, I'm never satisfied.
Well, I know that.
No, I think we're going in the right direction.
Yeah. Thank you very much for coming in, talking to us.
Thank you for the time. It's been helpful.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks for coming.
Sure.
So no motion is
Thank you,
required on this subject, but I will be submitting a letter to the planning board informing them that this condition has been met.
Excuse me.
Okay.
That would be great. Thank you. All right.
Is there anything else before we move on to the next piece of business?
I think we're good.
Yeah, we're good.
Nothing from applicant, nothing from Emily?
I'm all set.
Okay.
All right. Take care, everyone.
All right, everybody. Good night. Thank you.
Thanks for
thank you.
coming.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks very much for your input. That was really helpful, guys.
Yeah, that was great. That was really great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank
Well,
you for
thanks
bearing
Good
with us
night.
through our technical
Thanks. Good night.
difficulties.
See you later. Bye.
Good job.
Stay for GAR Hall. All right. Next up, GAR Hall.
All right.
Lost the agenda. Find it.
Is this likely to go better with fewer people on it?
Yeah. Yep, we're down. We have less people. All right, we're on the long-term preservation strategies for GAR Hall. Emily, do you want to present your summary?
Sure. So the great news is the GAR Hall, the physical restoration for phases 1 and phase and 2A, which are effectively the restoration of the front and side facades, is complete. There's no other work to be done, Susie. I did check with the Department of Public Services. They're going to try to paint that little concrete block portion of the doghouse as soon as they can get to it. And that's the one very minor item that's left. But one aspect that is left based on the memorandum of agreement with the Community Preservation Committee and the city is long-term preservation. And so as the memorandum stands now, either a preservation restriction or the development of a local historic district is required for the building. So we had been in the process of developing a preservation restriction, and we ran into some constraints based on the cost, effectively. So what the typical cost for a preservation restriction is, you would pay for not the maintenance of the building, but for the, sorry, one moment, please. The monitoring and enforcement. And that's typically for a property such as the GAR Hall, such an enforcement would cost between $40,000 and $50,000. So there was concern about using that funding. We, planning staff contacted the Community Preservation Coalition, and we also reached out to the Preservation Easement Program at Historic New England. We established a few pieces of information. First is for historic preservation related Community Preservation Act projects. A preservation restriction is only required if a property acquisition has occurred. Second, it's very unusual for a city or a municipality to pursue a preservation restriction on its own properties, as it requires another entity to hold the restriction and provide monitoring and compliance enforcement services. In general, very few entities are comfortable monitoring a city's compliance in pursuant to a preservation restriction. A city might consider a preservation restriction on a property if there's concern that the property could be sold at some point in the future. CPA funds can be used for an endowment for monitoring and enforcement purposes, but not maintenance purposes. And So if the city, if a preservation restriction is deemed to be necessary, there would still need to be a vote to allocate that $40,000 to $50,000 for the endowment. And so there is that option to continue with a preservation restriction. There's also the other option of moving forward with a local historic district or a local historic landmark. This is an alternative, and it doesn't cost quite so much, but it is a public process. It involves a solid public process, as is necessary for any local historic district or landmark. So it would be at least a few months in the making. A public meeting hearing is required, and an additional public hearing at the city council level would be required to develop the ordinance. So what's been established is per the requirements of the MOA with the Community Preservation Committee, some action by city council will ultimately be needed, whether it's allocation of funds, which are available because we came in significantly under budget, or whether it's the development of a local historic district, or it might be deemed that neither of these are necessary, in which case the memorandum would go back to city council to approve the fact that neither of these options should be required by the memorandum of agreement. If that's the case, if it's decided that neither of the options should be required to complete the project and close it out, a local historic district could be pursued. It just would be outside the time frame of the Community Preservation Committee's memorandum with the city for the project. So this is something that the Preservation Committee will be reviewing at some point in the future. Right now, they are very focused on trying to complete their funding cycle or their grant cycle. But once they have the opportunity to discuss it, it will be on the agenda. And as this is a historic preservation related project, it may be beneficial for the Historic Commission to work on it.
Can I add a couple of things?
Mm-hmm.
So it's very timely because at the last meeting of the Community Preservation Committee, the Cabot lobby restoration was discussed. And all of these points that Emily has made about kind of the difficulties of administering and paying for a preservation restriction on any property kind of made the CPC rethink the value of a preservation restriction if it basically was taking away funding that could otherwise fund actual projects in the city. And for the interior work that was under discussion for the Cabot, an option of having a strong long-term kind of recapture clause as part of the memorandum or the grant agreement with the Cabot was discussed, along with a long-term maintenance commitment. And I think that was to ensure that the public investment in that property was not lost through some action by the property owner or something like that. It does have an end date. So those two conditions of a recapture clause and then the maintenance agreement was like a 15-year period possibly. These haven't been worked out, but this is what was discussed. So that is an option to develop some kind of conditions that would preserve the preservation interest, that this funding went into the building for preservation. And so we protect that investment, whereas it's in the city's interest to protect the property in general. We want to make sure that the preservation pieces are protected. So siding doesn't go on there, or the windows don't get taken out, or something like that. So the discussion was very much around what are we trying to protect in terms of the public interest, and what is the best tool to do that. So that was raised. And I wasn't sure, Emily, what you said about the decision about whether the two conditions of the MOA would end up at City Council. I don't know that they have any say in the MOA. They might determine that a local district can't happen, but I think negotiating terms of the MOA and altering terms of the MOA is something that Community Preservation Committee would have to decide on. But I'm not,
So that would be
totally sure.
So there was some question about that when it was discussed in the planning department. We thought it might need to go to City Council, but it's something we can certainly confirm. Because I mean, the MOA is typically done between the proponent and the CPC, correct?
Correct. But the City Council's role in community preservation, the Community Preservation Act, is approving funding.
Okay.
That's their role. So it's a question mark to me, but.
Okay. I will double check that, because that would be wonderful if we didn't have to.
I know we've renegotiated terms, we've done extensions of MOAs, and that's all within the CPC itself. And then they're executed by the parties, whoever was on the original CPC, whether it's the mayor or whoever. So it would be good to know. But so I'm very open to the idea of not having a preservation restriction on the property, but I do want to make sure that the public investment in the very deep and rich preservation components of this project are protected for a long period of time. And I think getting a commitment for maintenance might actually be even more beneficial than a preservation restriction. So these are things we should think about.
To that note, that's a very good note. There might be a verbal commitment, but having discussed a monetary allocation with the Department of Public Services, which manages these municipal buildings, a maintenance fee or something like that would not be able to be allocated, although there could be a maintenance promise. But I know, I understand that doesn't seem
Yeah.
it more than a wishy-washy, but
It seems like that's
as I say it.
fly.
This is Caroline. May I say something? May I ask a question?
Of course.
Yeah.
What about the possibility of a local historic district putting on that building and possibly incorporating the Beverly Common and the public library? I mean, it seems to me the local historic district makes more sense than the other possibility you've been talking about. And I agree. I think the funds ought to be freed up for actual projects rather than being spent on sort of bureaucratic stuff, if that's possible. If that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
I would say that I agree that a local historic district of some sort would be the best mechanism and the least expensive. You have to hire a consultant to go through all the steps of doing the thing, but writing the reports, etc. But that would be made a simple. One building district would be the simplest of all. But that might run into problems with the State Historic Commission insisting on a larger area, just a single building. By the same token, working on the district might run into problems with the next door neighbors' churches on either side. There may be objections there which could sandbag it. But I think that's, in the order of magnitude, simply landmarking it is the simplest thing. The second simplest thing is to create a district, and that's actually more appropriate than.
Bill, could you repeat that last part? You cut out.
Nope, I did. Again.
Oh boy.
Well, landmarking doesn't protect it, though, right?
It does protect it.
What's that?
It does?
Yeah, so a local historic landmark is effectively the same thing as a single property local historic district.
Okay,
we
I guess I
didn't have-
didn't understand that.
I thought we
So
didn't have it in our city.
So it would be the same mechanism, and it would, for all intents and purposes in the ordinance, would likely be called a local historic district. But it would be a single property local historic district, which you could call it a local historic district or a landmark. Effectively, for these purposes, the same thing.
So then this commission would then regulate, applications would have to be made for changes to certain aspects of the building, just like we oversee the Fish Flake Hill district. Does the city normally apply for those?
On city-owned properties?
The city would have to apply for those?
I would assume so, although I suppose somebody might look at it and say, well, the city is exempt.
Right. Like do they pull their own building permits? That's what I don't know. You know?
Yes, so this is, I mean, has happened with the Powder House. We had as we're going through that restoration process, the contractor pulled the permits and the city approved them. And it would be, I believe, the same thing if work was done internally through Department of Public Services. They would be the ones of pulling the permits.
Okay. Because that's usually where it's caught. If something's in a district, it's because the building inspector says you're in a district. If you're going to do windows, you've got to go to Historic District Commission.
Yeah, and clarification would need to be discussed, and that would be part of the process of developing a local historic district. If that's the path that will be taken, it would not necessarily be talking to the neighbors, as in if you were working on a place such as Fish Flake Hill, it will be discussing it with the Department of Public Services and the building department and planning department, and confirming how those processes would work. That would be a more integral step of developing the district.
I would also point out that in the sale of the Hardy School to Montserrat, there was a condition put, I'll hesitate to call it a restriction, but a condition was put in the deed that any work on the outside of the building, they had to review with the commission, that it's the commission held the right of review over whatever they might do to the outside. And we have dealt with them on a couple of different occasions. But that was a condition of the sale, so that's different. That was putting a condition on the sale to a private entity as opposed to the city owning the building.
Weren't some of the issues that we had with that were that they made the changes without permission?
Pardon?
Weren't a few of the issues with Hardy School that they made the changes without the correct permission?
There may have been some, but there were others certainly where they did come to us, I know, some years ago. There may have been.
Sorry, Bill, can you repeat that, Bill?
I'm only getting about 30% of whatever's being said.
Oh. Okay.
Is there any way to find out if the Mass Historical Commission would accept a single building district or landmark, whatever we call it, before we go too far down the road?
I think there's an issue there immediately, because there was talk of creating a historic district, or basically nominating the bill.
So, Bill, I apologize if I'm cutting over you. You're cutting out again. Sorry, but to answer your question, so that was a bit of a different scenario with Massachusetts Historic Commission putting the brakes on putting it on the National Register. So the State Historic Commission is required to weigh in and make a recommendation when a request to put a property on the National Register is made. Developing a local historic district is a little bit different. With it, it's built into the process, it's built into Mass General laws that the Massachusetts Historic Commission has to have the opportunity to comment, but the development of a local historic district is a matter of the development of an ordinance, of a local ordinance. So ultimately, it's the decision of City Council and the city, and not the decision of Massachusetts Historic Commission. The Massachusetts Historical Commission might make recommendations, and this is my understanding of it. I will certainly confirm this with the city solicitor, but my understanding, my reading of the Mass General laws and the supporting documentation is that ultimately it will be City Council and Massachusetts Historic Commission would make a recommendation only.
Excuse me, this is Peter Benton. Can I add something?
Sure.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
Please do.
I'd like to second what Emily just said. I'm working in the town of Wellesley, and they have a number of single property historic districts, and they use it as a mechanism for homeowners to preserve their houses, and it seems to work quite well. So I think it seems to be a real possibility. There's certainly some precedent for it, and I think it's a good idea.
The town of Somerville has also done a number of single building districts, so to speak. But I think in perspective that the general policy of the State Historic Commission is to, when someone wants to put it on the register or create a single building district, they also look around and they try and use it as a mechanism to push whoever is the proponent to encompass all the relevant buildings.
Now sorry, go ahead.
That's one thing that kind of bothers me, the fact that, right around the corner is the Cabot, and the Cabot has no protection. So, most of Cabot Street doesn't have any protection. So it seems like while it would achieve the short-term goal of satisfying what we need to do for the memorandum and for getting the CPA money, I don't know if that strategy, if we had sort of sat down and said, we're going to make a local historic district, where should we make it? I don't know that we would say, let's only do the GAR Hall. I think we would say, let's think about Cabot Street or Broadway, or, we'd think of maybe a bigger area. So that doesn't sit very well with me, but I can see the immediate need to deal with GAR Hall, and I can see the benefit of getting GAR Hall protected in a shorter period of time than it would take to create a big district.
Oh, I think that the state was not thinking in terms of the broad lower Cabot Street or upper Cabot Street as a district. I think they were thinking of the immediate buildings around, adjacent to, which are historic buildings, adjacent to the GAR Hall.
Yeah.
For National Register, that's what you're saying.
Well, since
If I might,
but since there's so few protections, or really none in Cabot, then maybe we end up doing building by building, maybe a single building rather than nothing. I mean, something's better than nothing.
if this is Peter again, if I might interject two things. Number one, in our conversations with a variety of different people, the issue of landmarking has come up. And so there has been expressed an interest of landmarking mainly public buildings. And so the idea of creating a process whereby buildings might be landmarked is probably something we want to discuss as part of the preservation plan and find the best way to implement it on a single property, single building basis.
Yep. So
And
Peter, sorry, I'm going to interject real quick. Would you mind introducing yourself and giving a little context for those listening at home, or I can introduce you. I apologize.
Well, hey. Yeah, this is Peter Benton. I'm with Heritage Strategies, and we met back in December about the Historic Preservation Plan.
Awesome. Thank you.
And so I'll go into more detail about that in a moment. I just want to touch on that subject, but also, as I will also jump the gun and say that I was talking with Emily and Darlene yesterday about our recommendation to create a local historic district along the commercial corridor of Cabot Street. That is something that we want to recommend and discuss with you eventually. We're not at the point of actually making our recommendations public, but this is something we think is really important to do at this point, and we think there might be momentum to do it. So I will just add that, and Emily, you can shut me up.
No, thank you. I appreciate it. I wanted to make sure that everyone had context, just in case people were viewing this. And so, to move into item 3 on the agenda, an update on the historic preservation plan, just a little bit with Bill's and Susie's permission. We're in the process, sort of in between phases 2 and 3 of the historic preservation plan, continuing to do public outreach and engagement, especially as our community workshops were shut down due to the coronavirus. We're working on interviews. Peter's had a number of interviews with different members of the community. And we're working on finishing up a survey that we will be putting out to the entire community. And we will be continuing to do more. There will be at least one public forum at some point in the process, certainly before we have a final draft, so the community as a whole has an opportunity to weigh in and provide concerns and goals and ideas. But as we're moving into phase 3, which is reviewing existing conditions, and then based on those existing conditions, based on some of this public engagement, that having the consultant make some recommendations and identify opportunities. This has come up as a potential opportunity, is where local historic districts might be appropriate and desirable. Where other mechanisms, tools for protection and the celebration of historic and cultural resources might be more appropriate. And so this is the process that we're going through right now. And we have a steering committee meeting next week, and so for those on the steering committee, you'll hear all this again.
And so this is Peter again. The phase 2 that Emily's referring to was supposed to be our public outreach, which we actually started in February. And fortunately, we were able to have a series of meetings, not only with you in December, but with some other groups and some other individuals in February that gave us a head start on the public outreach part. But as Emily mentioned, we were planning to have a series of workshops and public meetings the week of March 16th, which is the week everything shut down. So, as Emily mentioned, since then I've been doing, slowly but surely, reaching out to some of the key stakeholders on other boards and commissions and within the community to have just personal interviews. And some of those conversations have been really interesting, and I can't wait to really tell you about them. I won't go into them now. This public outreach phase was supposed to end at the end of April. And there are some writing products that we need to produce that I'm in the process of producing now that I'm beginning to hand over to Emily. But I anticipate that the public outreach process will continue into May and into June, but that we'll actually start getting recommendations on the table in May. And I think at some point it would be good for us to have sort of a brainstorming session where we can lay out our thoughts to you, both what we've heard and what we're recommending before we actually produce a recommendations document. And I guess that would have to be on, in a format like this. But, I doubt there would be a lot of participants. But, I'd love to have that conversation, be able to put some ideas on the table, and like the one I just mentioned. I was really interested to hear what Wendy said. Of course, I'm watching this on YouTube as well. So the YouTube is a bit time delayed. So that means when Bill's talking, I hear Wendy's voice. But I was really interested in hearing what Wendy just said about the CABIT, because one of the things that has come up a couple of times is how can we put public money into private preservation projects. And so what you're doing with the CABIT seems to me like the way to do it. And so I really want to encourage that. And I think that's really, really great. So there are things like that I would like to talk with you about freely before we actually produce a recommendations document. So hopefully, within the next few weeks, we can have another meeting, sort of and sort of brainstorm, if that would be okay with you, Emily.
I mean, I think that's a fantastic option if the board is, or if the commission, sorry, is comfortable with that. We have one regular meeting scheduled each month, and if additional meetings are necessary, those could be scheduled based on the availability of commission members. And I'm wondering, I apologize, Peter, but to the rest of the commission, I didn't know if they want to move back into item 2 on the agenda, just finishing up the discussion on the GAR hall. If there are any recommendations to the CPC that the commission would like to make, or if additional discussion is needed, or we could move back, or we could move back to it after the discussion of the preservation plan is completed.
Well, it sounded to me like we were kind of landing on the individual property district approach. So I guess it doesn't sound like we need to vote on anything, but you would probably need more time. You'd probably need to extend your agreement with the CPC to allow for that. But it seems like that's a better option than the restriction, and a better option than some kind of a maintenance agreement that wouldn't be much more than a promise, I guess.
I guess my question is would it be appropriate then to just go ahead and request an extension to the memorandum then? You think that's the best option?
Yeah.
Okay. And I think we might have lost Susie.
Oh no.
There is still a quorum that the meeting can continue, but
yeah, we still have Caroline, right?
Yeah. Caroline, you're here?
Yes,
Okay.
I'm here.
Yep. Yeah, so the meeting can continue, but I just wanted to note that Susie is no longer here, and she may come back.
Hope so. So can I ask a question about the preservation plan? Just one thing that you had mentioned was the survey. Mm-hmm. I'm always really interested in what results come out of that kind of, surveying kind of regular people. So I don't want to get too far ahead on reviewing recommendations before we know what the results of the survey are. What's the timeline on getting that out and collecting data?
And Susie's back. So we're trying to get out the survey as soon as possible. We've finished all the questions. We have a little presentation that we'll be sending out to everyone along with it. Unfortunately, I don't believe we can attach it to the beginning of the survey, but it will be available to describe this is why we're doing the historic preservation plan. And so this is why we're doing a survey at this point. That should be out next week sometime. And that will be sent out. Yeah. And it should be out for, I'd say, you think 6 weeks is the time? Is that the time that we agreed on, Peter?
I don't know that we actually agreed upon a time, but I think it sounds like a good range of time to me.
About that long. So trying to make sure that as many individuals as possible have the opportunity to respond.
So Emily put together the survey, and she did a really nice job, and she had some models that she was looking at. It has a real strong emphasis on neighborhoods, which is exactly, I think, appropriate. And so we finalized, we got the final version. Darlene also reviewed it, the text, and they made final changes to it and sent it to us yesterday. And my business partner, Elizabeth Watson, is, we're going to put it up on SurveyMonkey. So we're renewing our subscription to SurveyMonkey, and Elizabeth is going to post it. And so I'm waiting for her to get that. I would imagine she'd have it done by the end of the weekend, so next week for sure. And then once we have it up, Emily will be able to send out, blast invitations for people, and in whatever formats you guys use, the city uses, to get it as widely distributed as possible. And of course, on SurveyMonkey, we can review the input as it goes along. And actually, I don't think, Emily, it would be bad to send them the survey if you want to.
No, I was planning on it, and I hope you will in turn send it to everyone you know.
Sure, that's great.
So yeah, we'll be sending it out to as many avenues as possible. We'll be sending it out to the master plan list because we have that email list. We'll be sending it out to all the boards and commissions, to the city, and we'll be posting it on the Facebook page for the master plan. Just as many locations as possible to make sure that we get it out there.
That's great.
You can use that new Beverly Facebook page.
Yes.
I know that the master plan has its own Facebook page.
No, but I'm saying the My Beverly, the mayor's new My Beverly page.
Oh, yep.
Long overdue. Don't tell him I said that. No, I tell him myself.
So if I may just comment again, I'd like to compliment you on your review of the building down at the depot tonight. I think your review was really good. And so I just thought it was terrific. And the one thing I would, they sounded as though they're going to come back to you. So Emily, when you write a letter saying that they've met their condition, I would suggest that you suggest that the Historic District Commission is expecting that they will come back again as the plans get further developed to mainly confirm that what they actually end up with in construction documents meets the expectations that you had when you were actually reviewing it.
So I'm not sure. Did members of the commission, were you under that impression that they would be returning? I'm not sure the applicant was under that impression.
Well, she did say that they were going to submit cut sheets and that they were going to submit additional documents. I got that impression that they would be doing that.
I thought they also talked about a model. They talked about a model, did they not?
Oh,
A mock-up.
The mock-up,
Oh,
yeah.
It doesn't.
All right.
It's a mock-up. That was a mock-up. That'll be a field mock-up on the building itself. And so it doesn't necessarily have to be at an official HDC meeting. It could also
us,
be
doesn't
your
it?
comments to their presentations to the planning board as the documents get further finalized.
So based on what the condition of the planning board, it was that they consult the historic commission. That condition has been met. It could be noted in the letter that additional documentation, they may provide additional documentation.
Well, what you could do is refer, rather than say that they'll come back to the HDC, say that the HDC looks forward to reviewing the further documentation as it becomes available. The problem is this: now I have a lot of confidence in these folks. I think SB Design does a really nice. They do quality work from what I can see. However, in a project, lots of times what you see at the conceptual level turns out to be quite different when you actually see the built product. And so to get over that hump, you have to be able to have access to the actual design, development, and construction documents as they come along. So they don't necessarily they've met their requirement, but I think you should say you look forward to seeing further documentation that's developed. And then what you can do is actually, provide your comment. If you have further comments, you can provide them to the planning board or to whoever is doing final reviews in letter form or in public testimony.
But couldn't you also say you're looking forward to the implementation of as many of the suggestions that were made as possible? I mean, they said that they seem very conciliatory. Now, maybe that wasn't genuine, but if you take it at face value, I thought they seemed amenable to all of Bill's and Susie's and Wendy's suggestions. So what if you just talked about?
I had that same impression, but I think that you might have further comments that they would appreciate.
Well, I think. Can you hear me? Anybody?
You're good.
Yes. I think that probably the proper language would we look forward to receiving further documentation as the plans develop. That's not saying we look forward to reviewing them. It just says we look forward to receiving them. And it would be up to us on receiving them and looking at them as to whether we asked to actually have further meetings or something like that. But
I can note that in the letter to the planning board.
Yeah.
I wonder
that the commission has expressed it.
I wonder if the letter should actually note the areas of the details that we discussed. I
Yes.
feel like, our conversation is going to be documented in this recording and the minutes of our meeting, but the planning board won't really have a record of what it was that we talked to them about. So I think it's important to say in the letter, we talked about, expanding the paneling treatment. We talked about the balustrade profile, even just a short bulleted list so that they know, hey, if these plans come in and that balustrade is gone, that's a big deal,
Mm-hmm. I can absolutely do that.
Okay. Thank you.
I can share the letter prior to sending it in to make sure that it's appropriate, that it appropriately demonstrates what was discussed.
That'd be great.
That would be very useful.
Yeah.
For everybody.
Is Susie still chairing this meeting? Who's our chair right now? I'm getting very tired, folks.
Oh.
I'm sorry.
I got to say that I only hear about 30% of what people are saying. The whole screen freezes and I get nothing.
So Susie has been
I'm only the
chairing.
I'm the 60% chair. I'm the main chair.
So as Susie opened the meeting, may I suggest that she be the one to move us along? And
okay. Well, I'm sorry. I felt my connection dropped in the middle, so I missed I'm not sure what I missed, but did we wrap up our conversation on the GAR hall?
So yes, it was recommended that a local historic district, a single property local historic district be pursued, and an extension of the MOU would be pursued
Okay,
to that end.
that sounds wonderful. So that item number 2 is done. Item number 3 is done. Is that correct? On our agenda, preservation plan, GAR hall. Do we have any
Aren't
new
we ready for
business?
minutes?
Oh, minutes.
Minutes.
Yeah, we have minutes.
So there are 2 sets of minutes to be reviewed. We have the January minutes from this year and the March minutes from this year.
I have a minor typo on the January meeting, second page, 6th paragraph, where it says Mason says it worthwhile.
It is a worthwhile.
It is a worthwhile. And then it says she states that the project, wait a minute, Mason states she that do, that you don't need that she
Okay.
in the 3rd sentence of the 6th paragraph.
Awesome.
See that, Mason, just strike that, yep. That's it for me.
I thought it was very well done.
Yes. So
Agreed.
are we just speaking about January or are we speaking about them both?
I have a March 12th item.
Oh,
All right.
And that was, I did not see any mention of the notion of incorporating the parking places that are across the street from Briscoe, you know, those 50-some places or whatever they are. We talked about the possibility that those would be allowed to count for parking spaces needed. Because if you remember, there was a discussion, Wendy made the comment that there seemed like a lot of parking on the property. And then it came up, well, why can't we use, since the issue was mostly around if there are public events there, why can't we incorporate those parking, you know, their angled parking along the street there? Why can't we incorporate those and make those allowed to count for the parking spaces so we don't have to add? Otherwise, you'd need another 50 or so on the Briscoe lot, which seems crazy.
Mm-hmm.
So somewhere there, and I remember Aaron talking about that as a possibility, somewhere that ought to be mentioned just so that it's not lost in the discussion.
I just don't remember the details of that.
yeah, I remember that, but we talked about the parking spaces along Colon Street.
Okay. I can go back through the recording and find out exactly where that was discussed and make sure that's included in the minutes.
I think it was sort of near the end of the meeting. It was towards the end of the discussion, but that's when we finally got to talk about parking and the fact that there seemed like as though there were way too many parking. We also mentioned the idea of with the single apartments, with the studio apartments, need 2 parking places, no, that kind of thing. That was somewhere towards the end of the discussion.
Okay. All right, I can go back and make sure that that is incorporated. To that end, the January minutes, if there are no other comments on those, could be accepted. There might be a decision to continue the March minutes until you review that the portion on parking.
I move that we approve the minutes of January 23rd with the edit as noted.
I will second that.
So Susie,
okay.
What you want to say is all in favor and then call roll.
Right. All in favor? Wendy?
Yes.
Caroline?
Yes.
Bill? Are you in favor of that motion?
Yeah.
Okay, and I am also in favor of that motion, 4-0.
I move that we continue discussion or approval of the March minutes to our next meeting.
Okay, I'll second that. Oh, I gotta do roll again. All in favor, Wendy?
Yes.
Caroline?
Yes.
Bill?
I abstained since I wasn't present at the meeting.
Okay, and then I say yes, 3-0. Motion is approved to continue. Continue March minutes.
All right. I believe that's all on the agenda.
Okay. Does anyone have any new business?
No.
That's good. Caroline, you have anything you want to add?
No, I will make a motion to adjourn if you want that.
Okay. Bill, do you have anything else you want to throw in the ring before we adjourn?
I'm hungry.
I second that too. I'm very hungry. All right, do we have a motion to adjourn?
Caroline, did you make a motion?
Oh, yes. Caroline, I make a motion to adjourn the meeting of April 23rd,
Second.
2020.
Oh, Bill seconds it. Okay, here goes the roll. All in favor, Wendy?
Yes.
Caroline?
Yes.
Bill?
Yes.
Susie, also in favor, 4-0.
All right.
I think the meeting is done.
Good job, everyone.
Thank you, everybody.
Great
Thank
job.
you
Thank
so much.
you.
Stay
Bye
well.
now.
Thank
Bye.
you all.
Stay healthy. Stay home.
You too.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.